Hello, and welcome to the second week of Skill Sprints, focusing on modernizing your VCL application with RAD Studio XE7. My name is Brian Alexakis, and I am a product marketing manager here at Embarcadero Technologies. This week we will take a look at how to be user-friendly with taskbar buttons, jump lists, and gesture input. Most existing Windows applications will run just fine on newer versions of the operating system, but they will lack a good level of integration with some of the new OS features introduced with Windows 7 and Windows 8. So adding a taskbar control, jump lists, and gesture input are three ways to give Windows applications the functionality that users have grown to expect from modern Windows experience. This week, the skill sprint will demonstrate how RAD Studio streamlines this integration process of getting these Windows features into your app. Here is the weekly lineup for the ongoing skill sprint series, which continues through the end of the year. Last week we covered how to modernize your VCL application look and feel with styles, and next week we will take a look at how to take advantage of multi-core systems with the Parallel Programming Library. You can find the full lineup at embarcadero.com/landing-pages/skill-sprints. We're going to begin today by analyzing the Taskbar component. The taskbar button presents the user with a preview of your app's window. This preview opens up when the user hovers their cursor over the application icon in the taskbar. The preview window also has buttons which can be hooked into your application. So for example, if you have a music app, it would display a play, pause, or stop button. Taskbar buttons also can show the progress of a running task within your application or the current state of your application with an animated overlay or icons. This would be useful to indicate to the user the progress of downloading a file or if a file is being copied, for example. Taskbar buttons provide a convenient way for users to interact with and control the app directly from the taskbar. Then we'll take a look at the Gesture Manager. The Gesture Manager is a very convenient way to capture touch events within your application. And we're also going to take a look at how to create your own custom gestures. Lastly, we will be covering Jump List. Jump List was introduced in Windows 7, and it provides a contextual menu for your application's taskbar button. When a user right-clicks on your app's taskbar button, the contextual menu will open. This menu gives users quick access to recently opened files or frequently opened files within your application. I've built a demo app that demonstrates the functionality of the taskbar component in C++. There is an existing app written in Delphi that demonstrates the same functionality, and I'll provide link to that at the end of this skill sprint. So I've set the style for this application to be Metropolis. Metropolis is a style that ships with RAD Studio XE7, which emulates the look and feel of Windows 8. And just to quickly recap from last week, if you go to Project Options, Appearance, and you can find a set of Metropolis UI, which again is a Windows 8 theme in different colors. Currently I have blue selected as the default style. When I open the application, I've created a combo box that contains each possible state for the taskbar. So if I do no progress, this is sort of the default state and no overlay will appear. If I change it to normal and slide this bar across, you can see that the overlay icon is showing that green sort of progress bar, and this is what you could use to programmatically set a loading sequence or some kind of state within your application. From there we have intermediate. This is, when you don't have an endpoint, so this is sort of a continuous process. And next we have error. This does have a range, but it just simply colors it as red. So this would be like, download failed at a certain point. And then next we have pause. So this indicates with a yellow coloring that the progress is paused and either waiting for user input or waiting for some other state to clear out. All right, let's take a look at how the taskbar progress state is implemented. If we examine the combo box, we'll note in the inspector on the events tab that there's an onChange event handler defined, and if I double click on it, it'll take us to the code. A switch statement takes a look at the combo box item that is currently selected, and that switch statement will basically just assign the different states to the taskbar progress state. Afterwards, the taskbar gets updated here with a helper function that I wrote. The taskbar has a maximum value to give it a range, and so that takes a look at the track bar maximum value. And its current state is set by the position of the track bar within its range. So this is how you would define the position of the taskbar overlay. So here we're at about 80%, and of course that correlates to this position here. So that's how you programmatically control what percentage of the icon is being overlaid. It's also possible to load an icon over the taskbar button. This can be useful to give the user of your application an indication of what kind of state your app might be in. So if I open up the demo app here and I simply click on this icon, you can see down here that the icon got loaded on top of the taskbar button, and I can in real time just swap those out. So let's take a look at how that is done programmatically. If I select each one of these components here, and they're just a T image, we again have a event bound to the click event, and if I double click here, it will take us into the code. So here I've grouped together each event handler for the 4 images, and when the event handle fires, the taskbar overlay icon property is set to the correlating image picture icon. That's all there is to it. Next, we'll take a look at taskbar hover buttons. Taskbar hover buttons appear when you take your mouse cursor and hover over the icon. We get a nice preview window here, and below the preview window, we have buttons. These buttons can be programmatically controlled and hooked into your program. So if I click this first one, you can see that I clicked button 1, and the second one, button 2, button 3. I've set up some control objects here to toggle the state. So for example, if I change the text here to hello skill sprint and I push apply, you can, as you would imagine, when that gets clicked, it reads in that value. Also, I can uncheck the enable, and this actually will determine whether the button is interactable or not. So if I apply that and I bring up the preview window again, you can see that buttons 2 and 3 are active, but when I click on button 1, nothing occurs. If I re-enable it, it's now active again. I can also toggle the visibility of the button so that it doesn't show up at all. So this is very handy to give your application reach within the taskbar so that the user can control your application or interact with your application directly from the taskbar. Let's take a look at how the taskbar hover button is implemented within the project. In order for the taskbar hover buttons to appear, you need to first add a Taskbar component. I've done that here, and when I select it, you'll take note that in the object inspector, there's a property called taskbar buttons. If I double click and open this up, you'll see the 3 entries here that represent the 3 buttons. And if I click on the first one, here we first have the name of the action, which is part of the action list, and I'll get into that in a little bit. Next, we can see the button state is enabled, is true. And you can also load an icon, which is a .ico file. Let's take a look at how the button event handler is captured. So if I select this thumb-bar button entry here, and I go to the Events tab and open up the action, there's an onExecute event, and if I double-click on that, you can see here that each button has its own action, and that action, it basically just takes the value of the edit box and assigns that to the caption of the label. Let's take a closer look at that action list. So if I select the action list and examine the properties by double-clicking on it here, it'll open up all of the actions, and here we have each action for each button. If I select that action item and click on the events, you can also get to it that way as well. If I double-click on it, it takes you back here. Other properties that you want to be aware of is whether or not it's enabled. By default, it is not enabled, so you're going to want to make sure to come in here and check that on if you want it to function. You also want to make sure that the visible checkbox is on by default as well. If you want to programmatically control how these buttons are displayed and whether or not they're enabled or not, let's take a look at how that would work. If we trace back from the Apply button and look at its event handler, this function update taskbar button state is called. It's a helper function that I wrote. It looks at each one of the taskbar buttons, checks against the checkbox, and there's two different states that I'm looking for: enabled and non-interactive. So enabled is enabled and it will respond to your click event. Non-interactive will show the button as being grayed out and will not respond to a click event. Separate from the interactability is whether it is visible or not. So the second set of checkboxes here just set the flag for its visible state. And lastly, we call the apply button changes, which will actually affect the taskbar buttons. So this is how you would programmatically set your buttons as to whether or not they're enabled or visible. RAD Studio XC7 supports touch input and gesture recognition for Windows devices that are touch enabled. Let's take a look at how this demo app responds to touch. VCL applications handle touch input and mouse input as basically the same thing, so I can demo here using just the mouse. If I swipe from the left to the right, you can see that it's going through my tabs here. If I swipe from the right to the left, it goes in the opposite direction. If I click here, you can see that this is just a standard set of tabs. I also implemented a custom gesture that I call right down right, and it is as so, right down right. Let's take a look and see how this is implemented within the project. So we have a couple of components that are working together to accomplish this. The first being the gesture manager. Gesture manager is what will actually capture and process different kinds of touch input. If we look at our root form element here and investigate the object inspector, we scroll all the way down to the touch property. Here it is. If we open this up, we'll find that the gesture manager is set. Further, if we open the gesture property, we have two lists here, custom and standard. If we take a look at standard first, you'll see that I've checked off the left and right swipe actions. If we click on each of these, we'll see that it actually is picking up the entry from the action list. So if we open up our action list, you'll see previous tab and next tab. And if I click on previous tab and look at the events, we have a after tab change event There's also a before tab change on hint, on update, and on validate, but for this demo, I hooked into the after change event, and if I double click on it, we will see the event handler here. I'm going to go and close this window. So there is a helper function called tab has switched. If we go and find that, the label's caption is set to the text of the currently selected tab within the tab control. Let's explore how the gesture manager allows you to create customly defined gestures and react to those gestures with event handlers. If I double click on this gesture manager component, you'll see that I've already defined a right down right gesture. Let's create a new gesture. I'm going to create a left down left gesture. And I'm going to decrease the sensitivity here. I do recommend that if you're going to create a custom gesture, that you're going to want to decrease the sensitivity. As you can see here, the warning popped up and said, hey, your gesture is kind of similar to existing gestures. But that's fine. I'll leave that to your experiment. So I'm going to hit test gesture now, and if I go left, down, left, you can see that it picked it up. And if I try to do some other gesture, it does not recognize it. Once you've created your custom gesture, it's possible to connect that to an event handler. And to do that, I am going to select my root form component here, and again scroll down to touch. And within touch, under gestures, we want to look at the custom property, which contains all of the custom gestures. For now, we just have the one right down right. And this is going to be pointing to the action list entry. If I double click on action list, we'll find here that I've created the right down right action. This is where the event handler is defined. If I open the events tab, you'll find the on execute event handler. If I double click on that, we get into the code view, and I simply am just updating the labels caption to say right down right. But this is how you could integrate within your own application logic to react to custom gesture input. Windows jump lists were introduced in Windows 7. The new RAD Studio XE7 jump list component lets you define at design time a list of tasks that provide shortcuts for functionality of your application and any number of custom categories with custom items. This also includes recently opened files and frequently opened files, which were added by the user either through a drag and drop operation or by using the topendialog component. Firefox, for example, uses this feature to let users open up new tabs, open up a new window, a new private window, and it also displays the recently visited websites. Let's compile this demo and examine the jump list functionality. If I right-click on the taskbar button, you'll see that the jump list appears. And the custom jump list entries are listed under the tasks submenu. If I click on any one of these, its associated parameter value gets passed to the application and is added to a list box. Looking further down the jump list, we can see a separator and yet another jump list item. Let's examine how this is implemented. If we look at the source of the project, we can click on the jump list item. Now, one thing to be aware of, by default, the jump list is not enabled. So when you add a jump list to your form, you need to make sure that enabled is checked on to true. Each jump list menu item is defined within the task list. And if I double click on that, I'll open it up and we can investigate each one individually. The arguments parameter defines the string value that gets passed into the application. The friendly name is what the user will see here. The icon is a path to the icon, and you can see here that I've loaded a refresh icon. Is separator will define whether or not the menu item is a separator or not, and you can see here that this separator line right here is actually represented by this jump list item here, which is set to true as a separator. And lastly, we can just disable or enable the visibility of the icon. Jump lists also allow you to show the files that the user has opened within your application in the past, either recent files or frequently opened files. Showing both recent files and frequently files is possible, but Microsoft best practice recommends that you only choose to display one or the other. So in this case, you can see the checkboxes here, and I'm only going to show recent. And if we recompile the program, I will demonstrate that if I drag and drop this icon file onto the application, and then right click to open up the jump file, you can see here that the application is listing that file that I just dragged and dropped. And if I click on it, it will read back the path to it. When your application is made of multiple processes, you can use the application ID property to keep a common jump list for all of your processes of your application. If your application already uses application user modal IDs, this is where you would set that ID. If more than one instance of your application can be running at the same time, you must implement some mechanism to prevent these two instances from modifying the application jump list at the same time. Otherwise, changes to the jump list from one instance of your application can override changes made to the jump list from a different instance of your application. Now, for more information on this topic, I'm going to link to a blog post by Marco Cantu, which I will show at the end of this skill sprint. Next week, we're going to cover the parallel programming library. With the system.threading unit, we're going to cover the following topics: parallel for loops, scheduling of tasks, self-tuning the thread pool, futures, joining of multiple tasks, and waiting for all to complete. I would like to bring to your attention a few offers that we have going on at Embarcadero right now. The first of which is a book by Nick Hodges regarding coding in Delphi. It's completely free for download until November 21st when you activate your RAD Studio XE7 trial. We also have a free Rapid SQL XE6 bonus pack, which is also available until November 21st. If you'd like to get some more detail on any of these offers, please visit embarcadero.com/radoffer. All of the demos displayed in today's skill sprint are available online for a free download. If you'd like to get some more information on how to use taskbar buttons and jump lists from the Object Pascal perspective, please visit Marco Cantu's blog at the link provided. You can also download the demos in both C++ and Object Pascal for the taskbar button and gesture manager portion as linked here. You can get the DocWiki tutorials for more specific information about each topic. And lastly, you can see the skill sprint schedule at the bottom. Thank you for joining me in this week's skill sprint. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I'll now turn it over to Q&A.
So one question we had here was whether or not the taskbar buttons will function in Windows XP. Well, if you try to run it in Windows 7 by default, actually the component should be disabled. That certainly is true for jump lists.
I think you answered a question earlier, which was, can you change the contents of what's in the taskbar, and you showed examples of that.
A question here, is a jump list different from a context right-click menu?
Well, I'm not quite sure the difference between a context menu and a jump list.
Well, the context menu is going to give you like the ability to close a window and stuff like that, whereas the jump list gives you, for example, like recently used documents and things like that. So it's the idea behind the jump list is a place you're going to provide recently used documents and quick navigation, whereas a context menu is, like I said, like the ability to minimize, maximize, close a window, etc.
I have another question here about manually populating jump lists. It is programmatically possible to preload recently opened or frequently opened files. So yes, that is possible to do. And you can find more information about that if you check the doc wiki that I linked here about jump lists.
Bruce is saying something got cut out on the XP question, and in XE7, Bruce has reported that the taskbar behaves gracefully, meaning it doesn't do anything bad. It just doesn't work. So you don't have to worry about the program crashing if it's built with XP7, XE7, sorry.
So Raj, we had another follow-up question about the difference between a jump list and a context menu. I think one of the big differences as well is that you can actually programmatically set application calls from the jump list itself. For example, when I showed Firefox, when you right-click on the Firefox icon, you can open a new tab, a private tab, and so forth. And you can create that same kind of behavior for your own application.
Yeah, that looks like it. Pat, there were a couple off-topic questions that we answered. One by Pat about modern user interface. Brian showed in last week's skill sprint about the Metropolis UI with gestures for swiping down and so on. If there's more that you're looking for in Windows 8, Pat, just let us know. But all that is possible with the Metropolis UI look, and there's sample projects that show you the things that you want to do. Swiping from the top to the bottom is gesture. There's a standard gesture or standard action, that you hook to a gesture.
So there's a question here about why the jump list icon is passed via the path instead of an image list. It really comes down to the requirement by the OS API, but one of the things about jump lists is they're actually available even when your app is closed. So once your app runs and sets that jump list, if your app is closed, that jump list is still populated even when the app's not running. And so that's why that icon needs to be provided via the path, is because if your app's not running, then you can't get it from an icon list that's in the application. It has to be from a separate file. So that's part of why that behaves that way.
So the first question we had was whether or not a hover button will function if the application does not currently have focus. It will indeed function if the application does not have focus. This is a Windows level operation, and you can actually test that with any pair of applications. It works just the same. Okay, so there's another question here about whether or not whether these VCL components are available in FireMonkey. The Taskbar component is currently a VCL only component.
Yeah, because VCL windows are Windows. In FireMonkey, there is a window and a window handle, but then FireMonkey renders things inside of that container. So you could still use the Windows API to implement hover and so on in your own code, but we'll take that back to the team and see if they can figure something out.
Okay, next question is about the Metropolis thing being available for FireMonkey apps, and indeed it is. The styles work for both VCL and FireMonkey. Oh, we have a question here in regards to hooking the progress bar into a long-running SQL task.
So the way I would probably do that is I'd probably create a separate thread for that long-running SQL task, and then have that separate thread do updates on its progress of the progress bar. You'll need to synchronize if there are multiple threads that want to play with that progress bar. If not, then you can just have your separately long-running SQL thread thing that's monitoring the SQL operation can just update the progress bar directly. Again, if that progress bar is being used by multiple threads, then you'll want to synchronize it. But otherwise, sure, you can update a progress bar in a thread.
Okay, we have another question here. Do we have access to the taskbar icon for custom painting? Well, you can load your own icon. So if you predefine it, through an icon, I suppose that would qualify as custom painting. It depends on what you mean by custom painting.
If you want to somehow do some animation, again, you saw some of that happening with the progress bar, for example, but you could update the bitmap, like if you wanted some kind of filling up of a rectangle or of a square with pixels or something like that. Again, you can update that display, that image icon, but you'd have to do that in code. There's nothing that I remember as far as animating the property of the taskbar itself. Usually what I do is, and Brian showed this, is you go into the IDE, you put the taskbar icon down, and you look at the object inspector, and it'll show you the properties and the event handlers that might be available. And that's where we surface up the Windows API for taskbars and jump lists. Same with jump list. Beyond that, you'd have to do something at the Windows API level. Troy said some nice things. Delphi's getting stronger and better. Very cool. Yes. Somebody made a comment. Brian and I were talking. This time he showed samples in C++, but everything that he showed is doable in Pascal as well, or Delphi language, if that's what you want to call it. And Brian, if you want, when you do your blog post, you can just put up a zip file with both language samples.
Next question is in regards to jump lists. Does the application have to be running for the jump list to work? So I'm going to assume that means if you create a shortcut icon in the taskbar. I haven't personally tested that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I haven't either. If it's not running, I guess we'd have to try that. You could try that yourself in Excel or something else. Is create a shortcut on your taskbar to the application itself.
Yeah.
And then see if Excel or Notepad or anything else that's not running shows you anything for a jump list.
As a quick follow-up point, earlier today we had the question as to whether or not the jump list would work, whether the application has focus or not. So kind of similarly related to that, it certainly does not need focus. As long as the application is running, even if it does not have focus, the jump list will continue to function.
Yeah, you can hover over it and see what it is even without activating the application.
Right.
Yeah.